I was working on my dissertation. I was doing work on the doctrine of election, and so you wanted to go ahead and trace that through the Middle Ages. And I had heard some things about Aquinas on election, and then obviously confirmed them. Oh wow, he's as Augustinian for the most part as Augustine is on election. And so that was an interesting twist, because when you're in seminary, you hear a lot of the, I don't know what you want to call it, the urban legends, if you will, as to who lines up where and who's doing what. And, supposedly Aquinas is just a medieval, so he doesn't read the Bible. And, it's all about, Roman Catholicism, thus foreknowledge. And so, once you push past the urban legends and you actually start reading the text itself, then you figure, oh, wow, there's more to the story here than you first realize. But then, in addition to that, later on, when I started doing work on the Trinity, I think that for as much of the 20th century that got billed as a renaissance of Trinitarianism, whether because of Barth or, Moltmann or others, I often got the impression that there was not a whole lot there theologically, and so I started digging back and remembering some of the stuff that I'd read in Aquinas, and I thought, boy, I started assigning it to my students, saying you've got to read the first 43 questions of the Summa. That's some solid material there, and it's going to make you think very deeply about the doctrine of the Trinity. But not only that, but also scripturally and exegetically. But I think what had got me onto that path was reading a number of the Reformed scholastics, whether it's Owen or Turretin, and you'd see, and part of me doesn't understand why this evades people's attention, because you'll have some otherwise, people that, I'm very Reformed, and so I'm reading a Turretin, I'm reading an Owen, okay, great. But I don't know if it's because maybe the marginal notes are in the margins, or because they're just kind of, abbreviated references, but you want to say, are you noticing that that's a positive citation of Aquinas there? But oh no, I only read Reformed authors. So it was that, that breadcrumb trail that led me back to Aquinas to say, I need to dig in deeper here if these Reformed theologians are positively citing him. That's not to say they always agree, but I thought there's more here. So that's what got me onto that. I think for me, the way I try to explain it to my students is that in the present day, we're kind of living in a hyper-specialized kind of environment where you can have somebody doing exegesis, but maybe, at least in his or her mind, not doing theology, or certainly not doing historical theology. Whereas if you rewind the clock to the Middle Ages, because theologians have an obligation to tradition, even though Aquinas says that tradition is essentially a probable authority, unlike later Roman Catholicism, but he says a probable authority, he's interacting with the history of interpretation, he's interacting with the history of doctrine, because he sees himself as being a part of that ongoing discussion, that ongoing dialogue. So I think he sees a moral obligation to engage it and to discuss it and to interact with it, so that you don't necessarily find that kind of thing going on as much. It does happen in some authors, but not as much in the 20th century, for example. I jokingly say this, the 20th century wasn't a good season for us. I don't think we made the playoffs. There were some standout performances, but as a whole, it wasn't the best century for theology. But in reading a medieval like Aquinas, it's a really engaging read in it, because he's bringing in that ancient discussion, and he's aware of those issues, so that it can, in relatively short order, maybe an asterisk, it's not an easy, it's an easy read, but in relative short order, you can get dialed into a lot of those issues and have a further breadcrumb path to those discussions as to who the authors are, so that you can dig in further. So it's immensely informative, I think, in that way.